Bhagavatam Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Madho Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayasha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki Shrinvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Yantostoye Vadrani Vidunoti Surutsatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, Text 11. So we are going to go from 11 all the way until 20th. We'll chant the 11th, and then I'll need some help, all of you, to do the others from 12 onwards. So the plan is I have a microphone here if it works. Then we will pass around every words. I will read the Sanskrit and you read the translation. Huh? I couldn't hear you, sorry. So text 11 we chant together. Atha tasya vitaptasya katidhayatanani nirabhidyanta devanam tani me gadatah shrunu Atatasya vitaptasya Atidhayatananiha Nirabhidyanta devanam Tani me gadatah shrunu Atatasya vitaptasya Atidhayanam Atidhayatananiha Nirabhidyanta devanam Tani me gadatah shrunu Tani me gadatah shrunu. Christian.
Atatasya vitaptasya Atidhayatananiha Nirabhidyanta devanam Tani me gadatah shrunu
Atatasya vitaptasya
Atidhayatananiha Nirabhidyanta devanam Tani me gadatah shrunu. Atatasya vitaptasya Atidhayatananiha Word to word meaning atha, therefore, tasya, is, abhitaptasya, in terms of his contemplation, katiha, how many, ayatanani, embodiments, there were, niravidyanta, separated parts, devanam, of the demigods, tani, all those, megadattaha, described by me, shunu, just here. Translation, Maitreya said, you may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form. Please repeat, Maitreya said, you may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The demigods are separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, as are all other living entities. The only difference between the demigods and the ordinary living entities is that when the living entities are rich in pious acts of devotional service to the Lord, and when their desire to lord it over material energy has vanished, they are promoted to the posts of demigods, who are entrusted by the Lord in executing the management of the universal affairs. Text 12, I will read the Sanskrit part and we try and we continue the translation. Tasyagnir asyam nirbhinnam lokapalo vishatpadam vachashamshena vaktayam yaso pratipadyate. So I'd like to read the translation, please.
Agni, or heat, separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. Purport. The mouth of the gigantic universal form of the Lord is the source of the speaking power. The director of the fire element is the controlling deity, or the Adidev. The speeches delivered are adhyatma, or bodily functions, and the subject matter of the speeches is material productions, or the Adibhuta principle.
Nirvinnam tavuvaruno lokapala vishaddharehe jivvaya amshena charasam yayaso pratipadyate.
I don't think the mic is working.
Or you put it on?
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know if they hear it outside, but
yeah, I think you're strong enough voice, so just put out voice.
okay.
Maybe just you continue.
Okay. When the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of air in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue.
Nirbhinne ashvinau nase Vishnu avishati padam Dhanenam shena gandhasya Pratipatti yato bhavet.
When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Ashwini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions. And because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything.
Nirbhinne sakshini tvashta lokapala vishadvivo chakshusham shena rupanam pratipatti yato bhave.
Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of life, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms.
Nirbhinnanyasya charmani lokapalo nilo vishad praninam sheva samsparsham yena so pratipadyate.
When there was a manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered the partial touch, and thus the living entities can realize tactile knowledge.
Karnavasya vinirvinno dishyam swam vivishu dishaha shrutrinam shena shabdasya siddhim yena prapadyate.
When the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them with the hearing principles, by which all the living entities hear and take advantage of sound. The ear is the most important instrument in the body of the living entity. Sound is the most important medium for carrying the message of distant and unknown things. The perfection of all sound or knowledge enters through the ears and makes one's life perfect. The entire Vedic system of knowledge is received by oral reception only, and thus sound is the most important source of knowledge.
Chammasya vinirvinnam vivishu dishyam oshadihi amshena rumhi kandum yeraso pratipadyate.
When there was a separate manifestation of skin, the controlling deities of sensations and their different parts entered into it, and thus the living entities feel itching and happiness due to touch. For sense perception, there are two principal items, touch and itching, and both of them are controlled by the skin and hairs on the body. According to Sri Vishwanath Chakrabarti, the controlling deity of touch is the air passing within the body, and the controlling deity of the hairs on the body is Oshadhya. For the skin, the object of perception is touch, and for the hairs on the body, the object of perception is itching.
Netam tasya vinirvinnam swadishyam ka upavishat etasham shena yena so anandam pratipadyate.
When the genitals of the gigantic form separately became manifest, then Prajapati, the original living creature, entered into them with his partial semen, and thus the living entities can enjoy sex pleasure.
Udam pumso vinirvinnam mitro lokesha avishad payumam shena yena so visargam pratipadyate.
The evacuating channel separately became manifest, and the director named Mitra entered into it with partial organs of evacuation. Thus the living entities are able to pass stool and urine.
Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmetam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Angum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Vedantaranam Anchakalpataruvyashti Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. So here we see that it's getting more and more technical, just like Adidev Radesh Prabhu was mentioning. That how all these verses, they are so technical, kind of difficult for us to understand at certain level. But this is also required because Krishna is the Vedanta Krit, he is the compiler of the Vedas, and definitely would not put in something which is not important. So just like the Madhurya Lila or the Rasa Lila of the Lord, everyone wants to hear, everyone can relish. So also this is in one sense the Aishwarya Lila, or the opulence of the Lord. And that also we all devotees can relish. There was one incident back in Mumbai when anybody been to a Jew Mumbai temple, Radharas Bihari? Yeah. And when the construction was going on, if you've been there, the Prabhupada quarters is on the 5th floor of one of the towers, and the other part was being constructed. And at that time, there was so much noise from the construction, right? And Prabhupada was trying to trying to do kirtan or class. And there was so much sound from the construction that hardly you can hear him. And some of his disciples, the devotees, they said, "Oh, Prabhupada, should we go and stop that construction, whatever is happening out there?" And Prabhupada said, "No, because this is also kirtan of the Lord, right? Because although we can see the Lord directly having darshan here by hearing the Bhagavatam, but because whatever that noise is from the construction, it's meant for building the temple of the Lord. Right? So ultimately that is also kirtan. So similarly here we see that this is the technical details, but it is also required. I was hearing one beautiful lecture by Sri Prabhupada, and the title was "The Pulse of the Universal Body." It's like when you go to the doctor, and what do they first do? They check your pulse, right? And he was mentioning just by checking the pulse, you can know the condition of the heart, whether the heart is beating, and so many different other parameters. And we can declare, oh yes, and this person is living just by checking the pulse. So similarly, this universal body, the pulse of the universal body is when we see that how every day in and out the sun is rising and the seasons are changing, so many things happening. So that is the pulse of the universal Lord. Sometimes people may say that, oh, God is dead. God is old and dead. But that's not true. We can see around us, just like the symptom that the body is living is the consciousness. Similarly, the symptoms of the universal body, we can see all around us. So many living entities, Jalaja, from the water, on the land, and everywhere in the air. And that is the representation of the Lord being there, or Lord's presence, that the Lord or God is not there. And also, of course, the activities of the Lord, they are very, sometimes, like we have this word, very common word, Adbhuta Karmana. It's like in the prayers, I was reading the other day, the prayers of Gajendra, and he's saying that Akhila Karanam, Nishkaranam, and there is Adbhuta Karanam. Karanam means the causes, so he is the Akhila Karanam, that he is the ultimate cause, and he's also Nishkaranam because he doesn't have any cause. He is the cause of all causes, but he doesn't have any cause for his existence. It's like we see in that verse, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Anadi. Adi, he is the Adi, he is the origin. There is no one, how do you say, Anadi? Anadi means no Adi, or there is no origin for him, but he is the origin. So the activities of the Lord are sometimes very difficult to understand, or especially the verses we are going on right now. But to our teeny tiny brains, we can try to understand. Or the lecture, one of the lectures I was hearing, Prabhupada was mentioning that how even this, the whole thing can be seen that, let's say if you have a factory, like a new factory open, and the owner of the factory is gathering all the managers, and he's kind of assigning different departments. Right? There are so many departments, or even in this city, when the city was first established, or the town, the mayor or the governor, he assembles all his officers, and then he's organizing and he's assigning different departments to different personalities, like the water department, or there's also sanitation department, and so many other departments. So here we see that how the Lord, by the Virata Purusha, by his gigantic form, is giving indications, and then all these different demigods, they are entering into different parts of the body of the living entity for the proper functioning of the body. And this body, if we see in the story of Puranjan, it's also described as the city of 9 gates, right? So in one sense, it's also like this body is also like a city, and then these different departments are controlled by the different demigods, and then we saw one by one. So the first one was Agni. The Agni, or heat, separated from his mouth, from the mouth of the gigantic, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. So Agni is controlling mouth. And then the second one is Varuna. And what is Varuna controlling? The taste. It says the living entity has a facility to taste everything with his tongue. And we also see in Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is saying that Rasoham Apsu Kaunteya. Right? There's this verse, Rasoham Apsu Kaunteya, Pradhasmi Shashi Surya, that I am the taste of the water. And just like I see sometimes these waterboard vehicles, and they have that motto, or the logo says on their bumper, water is life, or water, there's no substitute to water, right? Only water can quench the thirst. And so that ability to quench the thirst, that is Krishna. That's what Krishna is saying, that I am the taste of the water. That rasa, rasaham apsu kaunteya. And similarly, from the tongue we have the sense of taste. I was hearing to this one wonderful lecture by Radhavin Maharaj, and he was mentioning the same topic, that how different organs in the body and the senses and the sense objects, even the sense objects, the Lord is providing the sense objects, just like the tongue, it wants to taste, right? So that taste, the ability to taste, also comes from the Lord. So no matter how we may have Chappan Bhog, right? If you go to Mumbai temple, Jehu temple, in Govindas we have Chappan Bhog. Every Sunday you go, it's kind of expensive, 500 rupees or something. But still, you have all this Chappan Bhog in front of you, but for some reason, if you're sick and if you don't have the taste in your, doesn't matter whatever you taste, it just tastes like mud, right? You taste the rasgulla or Srikhand or whatever items are there in that Chappan Bhog, because that ability to taste, that rasa, which is provided by the Lord, that is lacking. And similarly, we see that if we have a wonderful play happening or wonderful movie happening, and if we don't have the eyes to see, then what happens? We cannot enjoy, we cannot relish. So that ability to see, that ability to hear, ability to taste, it all comes from Krishna. Sarvendriya Shotram. That the source is Krishna. Just like the powerhouse is the source of all the electricity. Similarly, if Krishna withdraws that ability, then we cannot taste, we cannot hear, or we cannot even see. And in terms of seeing, it says for the demigods assigned for the camera department. What is the camera department? Sun. And thereafter, the 2 eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of light, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, And thus the living entities can have vision of forms. And eyesight is very, very important. With these eyes we can have the beautiful darshan of the Lord. And if we don't have eyes, it's very difficult. We can see, sometimes I take a walk on the walking street and there's that school or hospital for the blind, and they are kind of training, with their stick. And I was trying to imagine, just like if I close my eyes and with the stick I try to, understand things around me, it will be so very difficult, right? So the eyes are very, very important. And we also see in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagawatam, a very beautiful pastime, wherein the gopis, they are thinking, they're always constantly thinking of the Lord, and they feel so very unfortunate. They say that all the other entities in Braj, in Vrindavan, are much more fortunate than themselves, because they can have the darshan of the Lord all the time. Because when the Lord Krishna goes along with his friends to the forest of Vrindavan, then the gopis cannot see them, right? The gopis cannot have the darshan of Krishna. And at one point they are even complaining to Brahma, right, that you have given us only a pair of eyes, why you didn't give us millions of eyes so that we can constantly have the darshan of the Lord. And also they are complaining that we have given this blinking of the eye, right, that we cannot constantly have the darshan of the Lord. I remember when we were small kids and we would play this game, like staring in the eyes, right? And whoever shuts their eyes first, they lose. But the gopis are praying in a way that they want to have the darshan of the Lord constantly without even blinking. And they are complaining that, Brahma, who made him a creator, that he has given this blinking of the eye wherein it interrupts our constant darshan of the Lord. And they go even to the extent they say that if we meet Brahma, we are going to tell him that when anyone takes birth in Braj, in Vrindavan, you should give them millions of eyes, right? And also you should give them the facility that they should not blink. And then they go even further, they say that, if somebody doesn't want, after taking birth, this human birth, and especially in Braj, if they don't want to have the beautiful darshan, Shyamam Tribhanga Lalitam, that beautiful darshan of the Lord, then you should make them blind. Very strong statement, but that's the bhav, that's the emotions, the bhav of the gopis, that they want to use these eyes given by the Lord in having the beautiful darshan of the Lord constantly. And that's how they're complaining to Lord Brahma. And then we come to the sense of touch. When there was a manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anil, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch, and thus the living entities can realize tactile knowledge. So this Anil is also termed as the deity directing the wind, Anil. So that is also my Karmi name, Anil. My name is Anil on the passport, so it's interesting to know. Anil, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch. And then we come to the very, very important department, which is the sound department. When the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them. So we need so many different demigods to control this particular organ, that is the ears. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he mentions the ear is the most important instrument in the body of the living entity. Sound is the most important medium for carrying the message of distant and unknown things. The perfection of all sound of knowledge or knowledge enters through the ear and makes one's life perfect. The entire Vedic system of knowledge is received by oral reception only, and thus sound is the most important source of knowledge. And in the 18th verse, it's repeating again about this skin. And the 19th, it's describing about the reproduction department, which is when the genitals of the gigantic form separately became manifest, then who is representing that? Prajapati, the original living creature. And we see in that Daksha Prajapati episode that how he is creating so many living entities, his father, and so many different kinds of species. And then finally we come to verse 20th, that is the evacuating channel, which is more like the sanitary department, which most of living entities don't want to handle, but there is also demigods in title, and that name is Mitra. The director named Mitra entered into it with partial organs of evacuation. Thus the living entities are able to pass stool and urine. So I would like to end here because I can't elaborate much in the sense because it's too technical for me to understand, and someday by the grace of the Vaishnavas and grateful of the Lord and so of Guru Maharaj, I can understand it. But for now, if anyone has anything to add, any comments or any questions, most welcome.
Do you have any thoughts on this, what it means, the partial representation? In each of these verses, it's the partial representation. Does that mean that the demigods are, like the organ is fully manifest, but they're only controlling a portion of it? Or does it mean that the organs haven't been fully manifest yet? I'm just, this word partial keeps showing up in every verse that the demigod is.
As far as my understanding, because they are not the 100% controller, the Supreme Lord is still the ultimate controller. So they are in the forefront, but although their reins, the horses are there, but the reins, the control is in the hands of the Lord. So in that sense, they are just partially representing the energy of the Lord, but the complete whole is the controller, the Supreme Lord.
No.
That's what the word used was adokshata in previous yesterday's verse. That he's beyond any material conception. So ultimately he's the controller, Sarva Karana Karana. And the demigods are just the partial controllers or representations. Any more thoughts here, Maharaj, on this?
No, that makes sense to me. That was what I was thinking along those lines.
Yes, bro.
So, getting back to Prajapati, I guess Lord Brahma is kind of like Prajapati also. He creates the universe with the direction of the Lord. So I suppose Prajapati also enters into the creation as a creative force. So I imagine, I was thinking that he was actually, Prajapati is, Vishnu is Prajapati, but I guess similar to like Lord Brahma as a creator, Prajapati also, his job is to, populate the universe or whatever. So I guess he has the ability to have 10,000 children at one time.
Yes.
So, and I guess he also creates all the different species.
Yes,
So
of
what
course,
is- do you know what-
everyone is empowered by the Lord, or the ability, the Paurusham Vishu, that ability in the man, or the ability to perform or do that is all coming from the Lord himself.
So do you know what the duty of the Prajapati is?
We have to go in that Daksha Prajapati, that which canto is that? Fourth canto. So fourth canto. We are in third, so we have to wait another few chapters to come to that. Right, so if no more questions, we can end here. Thank you very much. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagawatam ki jai, Sarve Bhaktavan ki jai. Mahaprasade Govinde Namo Vaishnavi
I see he has like
Swakapunya Vatandrajan Vishwas
planets, he even has
Shri Ram Jaya